The landlord promised the house had been empty for 6 months, but on our second night, we found fresh food in the refrigerator that none of us had bought. It was supposed to be a fresh start. My wife, Sarah, and I had just moved from Chicago to a small town in Oregon after I accepted a new job. Housing was expensive, and after weeks of searching, we found an old 2-story house for rent. The price was unbelievably low, $850 a month. The landlord, Mr. Collins, was an older man in his 70s. He seemed friendly enough, but before handing me the keys, he said something strange. "If you hear footsteps upstairs at night," he stopped, then smiled. "It's just this old house settling." I laughed. Sarah laughed too. Looking back, neither of us realized he never finished that sentence. The house looked old, but clean. Wooden floors, a small fireplace, a narrow staircase leading upstairs, 3 bedrooms, 1 locked door at the end of the hallway. I asked the landlord about it. "It's just storage," he answered too quickly. "Nothing you need." Then he left. The first day was normal. We unpacked boxes, ordered pizza, watched TV. Around midnight, Sarah asked, "Did you leave the kitchen light on?" "I thought you did." We walked downstairs together. The light was on. The refrigerator door was slightly open. Inside, there was a carton of milk, fresh bread, eggs, and a bowl of leftover soup. We hadn't bought any groceries yet. Sarah looked at me. "You did this as a joke." I slowly shook my head. "No." Then we both noticed something else. The soup was still warm. Neither of us touched the food. Sarah slowly closed the refrigerator door. For almost a minute, we just stood there. Neither of us knew what to say. Finally, I forced a laugh. "Maybe the landlord forgot he left something here." Sarah looked at the warm bowl of soup. "It wasn't warm 6 months ago." I didn't have an answer, so I threw everything into a trash bag and took it outside. When I came back, Sarah had locked every door and every window. Neither of us slept much that night. The next morning, I left for work at 7. Sarah worked from home, so she stayed behind. Around noon, she called me. Her voice was shaking. "Can you come home?" "What happened?" "I think someone's inside the house." My stomach dropped. "What do you mean?" "I heard footsteps upstairs." "You sure it wasn't the neighbors?" "There are no neighbors," she whispered, "and I heard someone close a door." I drove home as fast as I could. When I arrived, Sarah was sitting in her car outside. She refused to go back in. I searched every room, every closet, under every bed. Nothing. No broken windows. No forced entry. No sign that anyone had been there. Until I reached the bathroom upstairs. The mirror was covered in steam, as if someone had taken a hot shower only minutes earlier. I touched the sink. The faucet was still warm. That evening, I called the landlord. "Are you sure nobody has keys to this place?" He answered immediately. "Only you." "What about the previous tenant?" "They moved out months ago." "Then how do you explain warm food and a hot shower?" There was a long silence. Then he quietly said, "Change the locks." Before I could ask another question, he hung up. The next day, I bought brand new locks. Took me nearly 2 hours to replace everyone. I even installed a small security camera facing the front door. Sarah finally relaxed. For the first time, it actually feels safe. I wanted to believe her. That night, at exactly 2:14 a.m., my phone buzzed. Motion detected, front door camera. I opened the app immediately. The front porch was empty. No person. No animal. Nothing. Then another notification appeared. Motion detected, upstairs hallway camera. I froze. We hadn't installed a camera upstairs. I looked at Sarah. She looked back at me. Neither of us had bought or installed an upstairs camera. Yet somehow, someone was watching our hallway. I didn't sleep for the rest of the night. I kept staring at my phone. The notification was still there. Motion detected, upstairs hallway camera. But we had never installed a camera upstairs. The next morning, I checked every inch of the house. Nothing. No camera. No wires. No hidden devices. It was as if the notification had come from a place that didn't exist. Sarah refused to stay home alone anymore. "I don't care if this sounds crazy," she said. "I'm not spending another day in this house by myself." So she started coming to work with me. Every morning we'd lock the house, check every window, and leave together. For 3 days, nothing happened. I started thinking maybe we'd imagined everything. Until Friday evening. As soon as we opened the front door, I smelled coffee. Fresh coffee. Sarah looked at me. "You made some before we left?" "No." The kitchen was spotless. But on the dining table, there were 2 coffee mugs. One was empty. The other was still warm. I slowly touched the handle. Someone had been sitting there just minutes before we came home. We called the police. 2 officers searched the entire property. The attic, the basement, the crawl space, even the backyard. After nearly an hour, one of the officers shrugged. "Nobody's here." Before leaving, he gave me one piece of advice. Install cameras inside the house. The next morning, I bought 4 security cameras. One in the living room, one in the kitchen, one facing the staircase, and one upstairs, pointing toward the locked door at the end of the hallway. That door had been bothering me since the day we moved in. Every time I walked past it, I had the strange feeling someone was standing behind it, listening. That night, couldn't sleep. Around 3:07 a.m., my phone buzzed again. Motion detected, upstairs camera. I opened the live feed. The hallway was empty. The locked door was closed. Then, without warning, the doorknob slowly turned. Once, twice. The door opened, just a few inches. No one came out. I stared at the screen, barely breathing. Then, the camera feed froze. A message appeared. Connection lost. I grabbed a flashlight. Sarah begged me not to go upstairs. "I'll call the police." I nodded, but I was already climbing the stairs. Every step creaked beneath my feet. The hallway felt colder than the rest of the house. The locked door was open, only a few inches, exactly like it had been on the camera. I pushed it open. The room was empty. No furniture, no windows, just bare wooden walls, and one old wooden chair, placed in the exact center of the room. Nothing else. As I turned to leave, I noticed something carved into the chair. Very small, almost impossible to see. It read, "He comes back when you look away." At that exact moment, I heard Sarah scream from downstairs. I ran toward the staircase. She was standing in the living room, staring at the TV. Every security camera in the house had come online by themselves. The screen was showing 4 live camera feeds. Living room, kitchen, hallway, front porch. Everything looked normal. Then Sarah pointed at the hallway camera. My blood turned to ice. Standing behind me, at the end of the hallway, was a man, completely still, watching me. I turned around immediately. The hallway was empty. I spun around so fast, I almost fell down the stairs. The hallway was empty. No footsteps. No doors closing. Nothing. I looked back at the TV. The man was still standing there, perfectly still, watching the camera. Not me, the camera. Then, the screen went black. Every camera disconnected at the same time. The police arrived 20 minutes later. I showed them the recording. One officer replayed it 3 times. Finally, he looked at me and asked, "Where's the rest of it?" "What do you mean?" "The video ends before anyone appears." I grabbed the tablet. He was right. The recording only showed an empty hallway. The man was gone. Even from the video, the officers searched the house again. This time, one of them tapped on the walls with his flashlight. When he reached the hallway, the sound changed. Instead of solid wood, it echoed. Hollow. He looked at his partner. "There's empty space behind this wall." The landlord arrived less than an hour later. The second he saw the officers, his face turned pale. He kept saying the same thing. "That wall shouldn't be opened." One officer frowned. "Why not?" "It's load-bearing." "But there are no blueprints showing a wall here." The landlord said nothing. The officers cut a small inspection hole. Cold air rushed out. Smelled like dust, mold, and something rotten. A flashlight disappeared into the opening. Then one officer whispered, "Oh my God!" Behind the wall was a narrow passage, just wide enough for a person to crawl through. It stretched the entire length of the house, connecting every bedroom, every bathroom, every closet. Someone could move through the entire house without ever being seen. Sarah covered her mouth. "Someone's been living here." The officer nodded. "It looks that way." Inside the passage they found empty food cans, water bottles, blankets, flashlights, even fresh footprints in the dust. Whoever had been there had left only hours earlier. Then they found something else. A tiny notebook. The first page listed names. Dozens of them. Every family who had rented the house over the last 15 years. Some names had dates beside them. Some had red X marks. The very last entry had only 2 names. Sarah, Daniel. Today's date was written beside them. The police ordered us to leave immediately. They promised they'd search the passage from end to end. That night, we checked into a motel across town. For the first time in days, I thought it was finally over. At 11:42 p.m., my phone rang. It was Detective Harris. His voice sounded different, shaken. "We searched every inch of those tunnels. And we found no one." I closed my eyes. "What about the footprints?" "They stopped." "What do you mean they stopped?" "They didn't lead outside. They didn't lead to another room. They simply ended in the middle of the tunnel." Before I could respond, he asked one final question, a question that still keeps me awake. "When you moved in, did the landlord ever tell you why the previous tenants left?" "No." There was a long silence. Then he quietly replied, "They didn't." Detective Harris's last words echoed in my head. The previous tenants didn't leave. They were never found. Couldn't sleep that night. Sarah couldn't either. Neither of us spoke. Every little sound from the motel hallway made us jump. Around 5:30 the next morning, my phone rang. It was Detective Harris. His voice was calm. Too calm. "We found something." An hour later, we were standing outside the house again. Police tape surrounded the property. Forensics were everywhere. Detective Harris walked us to the backyard. Behind an old shed, Workers had uncovered a rusted metal hatch buried beneath years of dirt. "We almost missed it," he said. "It wasn't on any property records." They lifted the hatch. A narrow concrete staircase disappeared underground. The air coming from below was freezing. The tunnel led beneath the entire house. Unlike the hidden passage in the walls, this place looked older, much older. Concrete walls, rusted pipes, old electrical wiring. It looked like someone had built it decades ago. At the end of the tunnel, there was a steel door. One officer forced it open. Inside was a small room. No furniture, no windows, just shelves, covered with boxes. Every box had a year written on it. 2008, 2011, 2014, 2018, 2022. Detective Harris opened one. Inside were wallets, car keys, phones, family photographs, children's toys, passports. Every box belonged to a different family. Families who had rented the house. Families who had vanished. Sarah suddenly grabbed my arm. "Daniel!" I turned. On the bottom shelf was another box. Written across it in black marker was this year, 2025. My blood turned to ice. The box already had our names on it. Inside were copies of our driver's licenses, a spare key to my car, Sarah's necklace, even the watch I'd lost 3 days earlier. Someone had been collecting our belongings before we even realized they were missing. Detective Harris immediately ordered everyone out. "This place is now a crime scene." As we climbed back toward the surface, I looked over my shoulder one last time. I wish I hadn't. At the end of the tunnel, someone was standing in the darkness, watching us, not moving, just watching. Before I could point, the lights flickered. For less than a second, the tunnel went completely black. When the lights came back, the figure was gone. The landlord was arrested that afternoon. During questioning, he admitted he knew about the hidden passages. He admitted he'd kept renting the house, but he swore he'd never gone into the tunnels. He kept repeating the same sentence, over and over. He told me never to go down there after midnight. Police asked him who he was. The landlord simply replied, "The man who built the house." The problem was, according to county records, the man who built the house had died 43 years earlier. The house was demolished 2 months later. Every wall, every tunnel, every room, reduced to rubble. The investigation officially ended. No suspect was ever found. No explanation was ever given. A year has passed since then. Sarah and I moved to another state. We never talk about that house anymore. Sometimes, it's easier to pretend it never happened. Until last week, I was cleaning out old boxes in our garage. Inside one of them, I found a house key, old, rusted, attached to a faded tag. On the tag, in my own handwriting, were 5 words. "Spare key, back door." I don't remember writing it. I don't remember ever seeing that key before. But when I turned it over, my heart stopped. Stamped into the metal was the address of the house that no longer exists.